This is Scott Spratt from ProFootballFocus.com Fantasy, and this is another Fantasy Slant. Now that we're 3 weeks into the season, it's a good time to look at the target distribution for receivers on teams, to check out which number one receivers are getting a heavy workload from their quarterbacks, and which ones that were expected to are not, and may no longer be number one receivers at all. First, let's start with the positive guys for fantasy, and that starts in Buffalo, where rookie Sammy Watkins has 23 targets, compared to 36 for all other wide receivers and tight ends on the Bills combined. Even though the Bills aren't a pass-heavy offense, Watkins is getting such a heavy distribution of their targets that he can actually be an effective top 35 receiver the rest of the way. In New Orleans, Jimmy Graham has obviously been the target hog with 31 targets so far this season, but rookie Brandon Cooks has 23 targets compared to just 13 for veteran Marcus Colston. I think we expected Breeze to spread the ball around a little bit more than he has, but the fact that he hasn't is good news for Cooks, who joins Watkins as a top 35 receiver, and is bad news for Colston, who you should look to sell for whatever value you can get in shallower formats. Finally, on the Eagles, Jerry Maclin has returned from his injury last year and become the clear-cut number one receiver on this team. His 31 targets this year are just 2 fewer than Jordan Matthews and Riley Cooper combined. And Zach Ertz, while he's been an effective fantasy player so far, has just 13 targets for the year, which means that Maclin is the clear guy on the team and a top 15 receiver overall. On the other side of things, let's start in San Diego, where Keenan Allen, after a very impressive rookie campaign, has just 17 targets so far this season. That's 3 fewer than Eddie Royal, and even worse, both Gates and Ladarius Green, the 2 tight ends, have 25 targets, which in effect makes Allen the number 3 target on the team. I think Allen's potential in the long term is great, but for this season, I think the return of some of the healthier players like Malcolm Floyd on the team has allowed Rivers to go all around, and the defensive attention has moved Allen's way. So I question whether he's a top 30 receiver the rest of the way. In Baltimore, it's been a huge side with the 2 Smiths. Steve Smith, new to town, has actually had 32 targets, twice as many as incumbent Torrey Smith. They just lost Dennis Pitta to what looks like a season-ending hip injury, but last season, Torrey Smith was more effective with Pitta with 10 targets per game than he was without Pitta, 7.25 targets per game. So I think Steve Smith is clearly a top 15 receiver the rest of the way, and I think Torrey Smith is basically droppable in all but deeper formats. Finally, in Seattle, after what looked like a really strong start to the season on the NFL opener, Percy Harvin has just 17 targets for the season compared to Doug Baldwin's 16. I think we really expected Harvin to be a potential PPR threat this season, but the lack of targets are going to make that really difficult, especially with his low average depth of target. Now, he'll catch some carries this season, like his 50-yard run a couple weeks ago, and that's going to buoy his potential, but I think those looking for 5 to 10 catches a game from Harvin are going to be disappointed in what looks like still the run-heaviest offense in the league. From Pro Football Focus, this is Scott Spratt.